The root cause of the Civil War is clear.
What caused the Civil War was
slavery.
The main cause and why the South decided to secede was for slavery.
But according to a report from the Southern Poverty Law Center, only 8% of high school seniors surveyed could name slavery as the root cause of the Civil War. So why do our history textbooks get it so wrong?
Y'all don't want to deal with the fucked up shit that y'all ancestors did.
Textbooks are written and edited for states.
This is Antoinette Waters, a history teacher at Wakefield High School in Arlington, Virginia, who says the state
has the final say in what is in a textbook.
Which is how you end up with textbooks like this 1993 textbook from Alabama, which opens its brief section on slavery with this: people of all races have been slaves. And then goes on to teach children that the main difference between the North and the South leading up to the Civil War wasn't slavery, but rather a fight between the independent-minded Southern states and an overbearing federal government, or as the textbooks put it, states' rights.
When you say states' rights, I always like to answer a state's rights to do what?
It's the state's rights to do what? To have slavery.
Textbooks like these are approved at the state level, but anyone, regardless of their accreditation, education, or agenda, is free to write or edit a school history textbook.
And sometimes when you go down the list of editors, some of them may not be historians. It could be a PTA mom. It could be a minister.
And because anyone can edit the contents of a history textbook,
you have to think of what perspective do they want to be told.
Around the start of the Reconstruction era, some white Southerners wanted to tell a whitewashed perspective of Civil War history. They started organizations dedicated to memorializing Confederate soldiers, erected statues to Confederate generals, and perhaps most troublingly, they established commissions dedicated to overseeing and recommending textbooks for children, which is why
slavery in our classrooms was taught as being this benign institution. Paternalistic slave owners enslaved people as loving members of the white family. And of course, African Americans and African American scholars had always said, this makes no damn sense.
This is Hassan Kwame Jeffries, an associate professor of African American history at Ohio State University.
We really don't begin to see a change in the way slavery is taught in America's classrooms until the Civil Rights era, where African Americans are more thoroughly integrated into the decision-making in the classroom.
But progress was slow. For some states, those changes to their textbooks are only occurring today, a half century later. In fact, this is the first year that public school students in Texas will be required to learn that slavery was the central cause of the Civil War.
It takes more work to undo the fucked up shit that our ancestors, or really y'all ancestors, did.
This is our colleague, Taryn Finley, editor of HuffPost Black Voices.
A part of the first step in addressing these things is to actually admit that the history that we're teaching our kids, they're lies. We're telling them lies.
The inaccuracies in children's textbooks are important to address because children grow up to be adults who say things like,
the lack of an ability to compromise led to the Civil War.
In order to ensure her students aren't taking in an agenda-driven view of history, Antoinette has basically tossed textbooks altogether.
How do I say what the facts are? I actually use primary source documents. You can't argue with the documents. And I take out the very first state to secede's paper, and I read them. The cause of the Civil War 100% was enslavement.
Alexander Stephens, Vice President of the Confederacy, says clearly, slavery is the cornerstone of the Confederacy.
Whether it be the economics of enslavement, the expansion of enslavement.
Confederates themselves are clear that slavery is the central cause of secession and the glue that is binding the states of the Confederacy. We don't have to make up words. We can use the own words of people in the time that they are living.
Yet even now, when most American textbooks include slavery as the cause of the Civil War, the problem isn't what's included in the textbooks, but
what's left out that makes these textbooks problematic.
For example, There's
almost no discussion of the fact that slavery existed in the North.
Or that you could be opposed to the institution of slavery
and still believe in white supremacy. That is fundamental. If you do not get that, if you only get the anti-slavery side, if you only get the abolition side, and you drop the belief in white supremacy, then you wind up with a mistaken notion that racism is something that is confined solely to the South. By avoiding these hard topics of slavery and teaching it accurately, what we are doing is avoiding turning the camera back on ourselves and explaining why do we have the problems that we have today.
You will not replace us!
Progress is so slow. Change is so constant here, but progress is such a slow process. And a lot of that has to do with us not facing our
FDP!
If you can't accurately understand the past, the ways in which society has been built and constructed economically, politically, and socially, then you cannot make sense of the present. And if you can't make sense of the present, how on earth are you expected to solve the problems that are plaguing us today and will continue to plague us in the future?
I think it's important for our kids to know the truth because they have to know where we've come from. But then they also have to understand the beautiful journey of overcoming, how you can be enslaved and start with nothing and become president of the United States of America.